Hi, my name is Charles Malki, biologist and plant expert with Ivory Organics, where we grow cool plants, and today we have a special guest assistant, Isabelle. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Isabelle from Isabelle's YouTube adventure. Please go check us out.
So I'll put the links to Isabelle's YouTube adventure where you'll find us doing some fun activities predominantly throughout California, and I'll also put that link at the end of this educational moment. But what I want to share with you today is we just returned just a few days ago from Zager Genetics, and this is where they hybridize and have been creating some of the best fruit flavors on the market. And this is a natural hybridization process, just as green apple would cross with a red apple, with bees pollinating between these two different trees to create apples that may be more blush pink in color. Again, the process of hybridization. What they do at Zager Genetics is they accelerate and scientifically control these crosses between two superior parents, and they're planting about 50,000 seeds from those parent seeds to select the next 2 to 3 most amazing fruit flavors. And Isabelle, what was a couple of your favorite flavors that we tasted when we visited Zager's Farms?
Well, I like the Ebony Rose.
So what was so special about the Ebony Rose PLUOT that you got to try?
Well, the flesh was a nice dark red color, and the flavor was really nice too. So really juicy.
So very selected. So a PLUOT is a cross between a plum and an apricot. It's something that Zager's Farms have been doing since the 1960s. So they've got decades of experience. And keep in mind, they're planting 50,000 trees a year and picking the best 2 or 3 on average from those and ultimately ranking them. So the Ebony Rose is a commercial variety not available to most backyard orchard growers, such as what we have here in our backyard garden, but a great variety that is really up there. And when we also, the day after, got to visit Tom Spellman at the Dave Wilson Nursery, and one that comes pretty close and one of the most popular selling PLUOTs is one known as Dapple Dandy PLUOT. And we both had the pleasure of tasting that, and we left there saying we got to get that tree into the home garden. And that's exactly what we did today. And together we're going to be planting, and I'm going to share with you a few helpful tips. This variety of PLUOT, if we take a look over here, you can see is known as the Dapple Supreme. And this one is a little bit more of a lower chill, being that we're here in Southern California. It doesn't require as many chill hours as the Dapple Dandy that we tasted up in Northern California, and where it's actually a lot colder. Take a look at the description here. It says it's a new low chill PLUOT. Dapple Supreme derives its name from 2 of the best Dapple Dandy and Flavor Supreme, with the red dapple skin like Dapple Dandy and the sweet red flesh like Flavor Supreme. Dapple Supreme is sure to please with only 300 hours and ripens mid-June. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to plant this tree together, and Isabelle is going to be my helpful assistant to make sure that we do a perfect job from start to finish. So let's get started. So we had the pleasure of meeting and shaking the hand of Floyd Zager, who's recognized as being the most prolific stone fruit breeder of the modern era. He's been crossing fruit trees since 1960, and he's got some of the most amazing fruits on his 160-acre orchard. And again, as we mentioned earlier, the trees that are in circulation, both commercially as well as for the backyard orchard grower, are just one of a few from over 50,000 seedlings that are planted every single year. And again, each of those seedlings are crossed between 2 amazing parents just to find another child that is something, with superior characteristics that'll then be bred into future generations as well. And what I want to say about what Floyd Zager has accomplished is he's crossed peaches and plums, apricots and cherries, cherries and plums, and came up with, just as we're going to be doing today with the PLUOT, a PLUOT is a predominantly plum, and aught being the apricot. There's also apriums, which is predominantly apricot with some hint of plum. Then they got pluaries, which are plum and cherry. And what the value of that is to be able to take cherries that ripen early in the season and have cherries that ripen later on in the season. So we have a longer growing period of cherries. And then there's another cool fruit called a picatum, which is a peach and a plum. And wait, let's do that again. So picatum, peach, apricot, and plum. So you got those three distinct characteristics of these three fruit all in one fruit. Some amazing science, and again, it's all natural hybridization done scientifically and with a lot of time, energy, and effort, as it can take anywhere from 10 to 15 years just to come up with one flavor. What we're going to do now is plant the tree. We're going to cover a variety of tips, and let's get started with preparing the planting hole. A lot of the old science when it comes to preparing the hole will say plant your hole twice as deep and twice as wide. And I want to correct that right now with the goal when preparing your hole is to only go as deep. As you can see, the soil level here in the container is not quite to the top. So we don't even need to dig a hole the depth of the container. We only need to go to this height, which is where the soil level is. So we're only going to do those about 5 to 6 inches and not maybe the complete 12 inches that this container is. So the goal is to only go as deep as the container, but feel free to go wider, as 80 to 90% of the root zone is going to be in the top 18 inches anyways. To go deeper, we're going to talk about the flaw with that is you're going to probably end up, and I've seen this on social media with a lot of flawed, failed trees where people are uprooting them a few years later because the tree has settled too deep. And by not preparing a hole that's too deep, you're going to prevent this tree from sinking and then having its stem end up deep in the soil and result in a phenomenon known as stem rot, which will ultimately shorten the life of the tree. The goal is with today's planting, we're going to get to enjoy these awesome. So what are we going to be planting today, Isabelle?
A Dapple Dandy PLUOT Supreme.
A Dapple Dandy. It's actually derived from the Dapple Dandy, but it's called a Dapple Supreme. So this variety of PLUOT is known as the Dapple Supreme, which is a cross from one parent that was Dapple Dandy and the other parent was Flavor Supreme. Both PLUOTs together created the Dapple Supreme. So now what we have is the characteristics of the Dapple Dandy in regards to color, but we got the flavor from Flavor Supreme in the Dapple Dandy PLUOT. So, and that's why this is like the next most amazing PLUOT variety fruit tree. And the other cool thing about this compared to the Dapple Dandy is its chill hour is a little lower, which is ideal for warmer growing zones such as us here in Southern California. So let's go and prepare the hole. Again, the key tip with this lesson is go only as deep as the soil level of your container. Feel free to go twice as wide, but you can go just as wide. A little, going twice as wide will just help loosen the soil and drive the roots into those directions. So let's do that first. So here we go now with our soil. I pulled back the wood chips just before the recording, and let's prepare the hole. So I'm going a little wider as we discussed, but we're not going to want to go too deep. So there's a lot of sand in the soil. I want to emphasize what we're dealing with here. You can see the clay here that's in the soil right there. You can also see that there's a lot of gravel that's in here, and there's some sand in there as well. There was other things planted in this grow zone before, that's why it was so easy to dig. But you can see that the sides are all quite clay, as you can see, which is pretty typical in Southern California. And then this here is some of that gravel sand that was introduced into the planting zone with the prior planting. Okay, and so now we're gonna just put some pressure around the container to basically get the soil and the roots off the container walls. And now we can simply, I'll just pick up the tree trunk, and if you don't mind, Isabelle, you're just gonna go tap, tap, tap on the sides, and the container will come right off. Watch this. There it goes. So now we're gonna examine the root ball. Take a look here, you can see that the roots have grown all the way to the side of the container. It's a good idea to rub your fingers along the sides to tell the air roots that it's now free and to now reach into the sides of the new soil that we're gonna introduce. And then it's a good idea to examine also the base. Let me get this piece of plastic out of there. Let's take a look at the base now and make sure that the roots haven't coiled around, which would be common of a root bound plant. So I'm actually going to grab these, and if there's any coiled roots, it's a good idea to also prune them away. So we're just gonna keep grabbing and pulling any of those root bound roots so that they'll all be free. There we go. And now we can put it in the container. I'm going to, in fact, prune. So Isabelle, if you don't mind getting me the pruners, they're right behind me. And what we'll do is we'll simply prune some of these roots out that appear to be just going in the wrong direction. And we're truly just giving a haircut that's probably less than 5% of the root ball. And we're gonna offset it with some of the pruning to the top of the plant in an upcoming, before the end of this lesson. And now let's position the tree. What I'm looking for, and another important tip, and you'll notice this with all the orchards that we visited across Northern California, again surrounding Zegers as well as Dave Wilson Nursery, a lot of the plants are elevated a solid anywhere from about 6 to 8 inches above the ground level. So the ground level is here, and most of these trees are planted somewhere up in this root zone area, and then a mound of soil is built around it. And then you can see that I've got this drip sprinkler system to one side, that have a second one on the other side to make sure the entire root zone is watered. So when it comes to watering, I'll just share this tip from now, but we're gonna be watering towards the end. Make sure you got water on both sides of the root zone, and then that way you're basically hydrating the soil biology and as well as the root zone, and not just watering one side of the plant. And again, that's gonna contribute towards a healthier tree. What I'm looking at now is I'm looking at the structure of the tree. There's a clear Y branch system that's going on here, and then there's some more branching going on up there. And I want to think about, how do I want this tree to grow in the future? And this here is a walkway alongside of the tree, and I don't want these branches to be growing towards the walkway. And I want to grow this as a freestanding espalier, as we discussed with our Meyer lemons about a year ago, and as we also discussed at the Dave Wilson Nursery in this past week, where you basically can grow the tree to be a lot tighter in structure and basically keep your walkway free and have the primary branches growing the directions that you'd like them to go. So I'm basically taking this Y shape and growing it wide and out of the pathways where this branch could in the future be in the way. So I think I've got it exactly where I want it to be. And what we're gonna do now is backfill the soil. So Isabelle, if you wanna help me, all we're doing now is taking the native soil and bringing it back in to around the same level as this topsoil that we've got over here. And I'm looking at even this root over here on the very top that caught my eye. And what I'm looking for is I want to make sure that this root isn't girdling the primary stem. So I'm kind of like getting my fingers around it, because I've seen some roots that would basically wrap itself like so. If I can spin this again so you can see it. Some roots in their containers, again, because it's such a small growing zone, will wrap itself, and what will happen as the root grows is it'll girdle the stem. And there's another phenomenon in gardening known as a stem girdling root, and what the stem girdling root will do is shorten the life of the tree. So if you spot it, you cut it out. This root we're gonna leave, and it's an important root as it's near the top, and it's gonna help contribute towards, you know, bringing in the minerals and the nutrients in the air. And I also want to share with you another helpful tip. Planting time. We're here the last week of July, and it's a 90-degree solid week, between 90 to 95, 98, every single day here in Los Angeles. And what we're doing is planting towards the end of the day. It's now sometime between 5 and 6 o'clock in the evening, and we're gonna water this tree very well, and it's gonna have all night to recover from all the shock that we're bringing to the tree, and pruning some of its roots and manipulating a little bit of the structure. And whatever we end up doing to the plant are all stresses which, compounded with high hot temperature days, can sometimes just kill the tree in a matter of days. We're gonna do everything possible to help pull it through summer. The reason for the summer planting is if we can get it established and growing, we can hopefully enjoy some flowers and ultimately fruit come next late spring, early summer. As again, the ripening on this is going to be we're talking about mid-June. So, you know, ripens right there. Again, it says ripens by mid-June, this particular variety. And I'm just hoping that, you know, I kind of like the structure. You would sometimes take off the fruit. So another helpful tip talking about planting a new tree, it's sometimes advisable if the goal is to allow the plant to reach the structure size that you want it to reach, is to remove the fruit, as removing the fruit can take away from anywhere from 20% of the vigor and the growth of the tree to as much as 80% of the tree's vigor for that year if it's also supporting fruit. Think about your own body, and if you're having to support a child internally, that's going to take up a lot of resources, whereas if there is no fruit on the tree can now focus on growth and root development instead of having to support fruit, even if it's one fruit. But if you have to have fruit and it's a small structure, obviously less fruit is more important than having a lot of fruit, as again, that takes away a lot of the resources that are in the soil that are going to go towards fruit production instead of establishment and accomplishing the height. So again, when it comes to brand new trees, consider removing the fruit for the first year or two. Again, I like the structure and I'm hoping that it flowers and I'm hoping that it supports some fruit as I continue to tweak the overall structure of the tree. So now, Isabelle, if you can help me, let's backfill the soil. I'll give you this little hand tool to help you while I use my hands to pull some of this native soil back into the hole. Notice we have not amended this soil with any compost. We're simply using the native soil right back into the planting structure. I'm making sure the tree is in the direction that I want it to be. And the reason, and take a look, I've got some compost here, but we're not using it yet. The reason, and again, I shared with you guys, I've seen this on social media, a lot of mistakes out there where people plant their trees and then a few years later they're uprooting it and then trying to elevate its location. And the reason is there's also a lot of old education out there that says to mix 50% native soil with 50% compost, and that is a mistake when planting a tree. I've done it even myself on some of the older videos that were published where we did 50% native soil with 50% compost, as that's the education that's out there. The new era planting methods simply state, bring that native soil back into the soil. If you're going to amend it, no harm in taking a little bit of soil or a little bit of compost and adding it, but it should be a very small amount. What you're doing ultimately by adding some compost to your native soil is you're trying to lighten the soil, you're trying to create more air pockets, because that compost is going to break down within a matter of a month or a few months. That compost that we've just added is going to be dust. It's pretty much virtually gone. It's going to be eaten by the earthworms and the other soil biology, which includes the bacteria and the beneficial nematodes that are in there. And that compost you added is virtually gone, leaving air pockets. And if there's too much air under there, your tree is going to sink. And that's the reason you don't want to do 50% compost with 50% native soil. So that's a helpful tip with that. Let me help you now with pulling the rest of this native soil into here. And let's cover that planting zone. And now I'm just going to go with my fingers and we're going to simply put some pressure around the tree. I'm not putting my fingers in this zone, which is where the tree was in its container. We're putting it along the sides over here. You can see that we're still at ground level. The tree is probably only an inch or two above, and we just talked about in the orchards they're a solid 6 to 8, maybe even 12 inches above grade. But here we're actually in a raised bed area. As you can see, there's this wall behind me. There's another wall at that level, and all of these zones are kind of like planting beds, and there's virtually zero risk of root rot happening here when we go to water. So as much water as we put, that water runs out because they're in these raised walls and they've got cracks and water passes at various places. And there's also drain pipes behind all these walls that pull the water away. So just letting you know that in this particular planting zone, we are elevated off of ground level just a few feet away from where we are at this point. What I'm now going to do is take the compost and add it. And this is the natural way, as it would appear in nature, is that compost is on the top of the soil, the leaf litter, anything that may have visited the area, left any waste, behind, is all going to be on the top. It's not logical to be putting compost underneath the tree when in nature there would never be compost below the tree. So here we just put a whole bucket of compost. And what we'll do at this point is I'm also going to be adding right now a little bit of this product as well. So before we mix this all up, I'm going to add now the 6 Macros Plus. And we're not going to use too much, as again, this is a new planting, but I do want to make sure that the plants got in the soil, and the soil biology is capitalizing on all of these ingredients, which include nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, sulfur, and calcium. And I know nitrogen is associated with growth, which is what we want. Phosphorus associated with flowers and fruit, but it's not just that. Phosphorus is also important in a lot of the metabolic processes of the plant. Potassium for disease resistance, root development and strength. Magnesium, sulfur, and calcium, all important macronutrients. Nutrients plants need in abundance, and this is the only fertilizer that's focused on getting your plants all of the macronutrients. In addition to, it contains the beneficial microbes and mycorrhiza. So it's got some of the soil biology to help the plant create those networks important to life in the soil and important in the organic garden. And what I'm just going to do is just take a couple of tablespoons here, and we're just going to add it. I could add a lot more, but again, this is a brand new planting. There's no need to do that much more. You can see it makes 20 gallons. I could also take a tablespoon to a gallon of water, and I've got my water gallon over here. So this is a 2-gallon container. I could have added also 2 tablespoons of the product to these 2 gallons of water. I could then take off the head. If you want to use it as a foliar spray, which we've done in earlier videos, you can also do a foliar feed on the plant, or again, with the end off, I can just water the plant from the top down, which I might do towards the end. And you can see that these smaller containers, which are 11.8 ounces, there's the premium blend, which has a lower NPK compared to the super blend with the higher NPK. And these 11.8 ounce bags makes 20 gallons of liquid fertilizer. And what we're going to do now, Isabelle, if you can help me, is we're going to now mix the compost, the fertilizer, and the native soil in that top inch. So if you want to help like scatter that around for me. That's great. You can go a little bit deeper. You're going to want to capture some of that native soil and bring some of that compost in contact with the native soil, and then the fertilizer will be there as well. As we continue mixing, we're going to create a little bit of a berm to help capture the water and for those first initial waterings. And you can see that the air roots are right here. They're still right there on the surface. And we're just going to cover that up. We'll put the sprinkler down in place. And again, we talked about the importance of watering, which we're going to do right now. But when it comes to watering, we've got this sprinkler here watering this zone. I will come with my hose at least once or every other week, and I'll just do a deep soaking around the entire root ball, as I'm not just watering the tree, but I'm watering that entire soil biology that surrounds the root zone of the tree, so that the tree can maximize on all the beneficial life that's surrounding the tree. And it's not just happening on one side of the tree, which will ultimately affect the overall health and productivity of the tree for the many years to come. So let's go and water the plant. Okay, Isabelle, so let's turn on the water now. And now the hose is yours. The goal is to water the entire root zone. You're going to want to soak it. I would say we're going to water it now anywhere from, on the low end, 3 gallons to as much as 10 gallons of water. When we're with Tom Spellman, they talked about in the summer that they'll water their plants for as much as 24 hours. They've got a sprinkler system with a spinner head that waters at a rate of about 1 gallon per hour, and then they would run that for 24 hours, and the earth would drink all of it. There'd be zero runoff, and all of that water that's watered will pretty much be absorbed and taken in by all the plants. And you're watering, the goal is to water the entire root zone. We're not just watering the surface of the, we're going to want to make sure that you're watering and you're taking your time to water a solid 2 to 3 feet deep. So we might want to turn off the water now. Let's slow that down. And you can see, because the water is now going to run over the berm here. So we're going to stop, allow that water to soak in, and then we're going to continue watering towards the end, okay? The next thing I want to discuss is the importance of mulch. So, Isabelle, why would you add wood chips around the tree?
Well, to keep weeds away. So
keeping weeds away is one very important tip, but being that it's now the end of summer, I would say the #1 reason for adding mulch around your plant is there's actually 2 very important reasons. One, it's going to help the water stay in the soil. So it's going to help the soil retain moisture, which at the end of the day is going to save you money, because water costs money. And the fact you got to water less means you're going to save more money when it comes to watering your trees. So you're saving your money and you're watering your trees less often. So that's going to, that's one huge benefit. In the summer, you're going to want to obviously water your plants more because it's hotter. But again, the fact we're adding a blanket of wood chips is going to help save us water and the frequency of watering your trees. The second most important one that a lot of people don't know is it cools the soil down, which also helps the soil save on water too. They're kind of related, but by cooling the soil, it's going to help minimize the stress of those hot days, especially in places like Las Vegas or Phoenix, Arizona, or Houston, Texas, or even here in Los Angeles. Last year we had a 115-degree day here. So it's important to keep the soil cool, and in addition to keeping weeds away from the tree, because the weeds are also going to absorb a lot of that fertilizer that you're putting around your plants and taking those nutrients away from growth of your PLUOT. And what's more important is we want more fruit. We don't want weeds. So by putting mulch down, you're basically taking those nutrients away from what otherwise would be weeds surrounding the tree, and instead these wood chips are going to be breaking down, returning even more nutrients into the soil. So let's go and add our blanket of wood chips. Most of the water has now been absorbed, and we can just add, the goal is about 2 and a maximum 4 inches of wood chips around your tree. We're going to want to keep that sprinkler head open. So you're also going to want to make sure that these wood chips are not in contact with the tree trunk, because the wood chips absorb water. The bark on the tree absorbs water, and if they're in contact with one another, what is that going to cost to the tree?
Stem rot.
Stem rot. The wood is going to be absorbing a lot of water, bringing that water to the stem, and the stem will begin to rot as well. So that's a phenomenon known as stem rot. Good job, Isabelle. So let's pull that all back. So keeping the wood chips away from the tree trunk and then building it up 2 to 4 inches. And there is such a thing as too much mulch as well, as you're going to want to make sure that those roots also can reach the air. If you've got 12 inches of wood chips, you're also smothering the roots down below. So there is such a thing as also too much wood chips. So consider putting about 2 to 4 inches to accomplish all the benefits of mulch around your tree. So Isabelle, what is our next helpful gardening tip?
Well, the day you plant your tree, the day you whitewash your tree.
That's exactly what we learned from Tom Spellman, again, of the Dave Wilson Nursery.
Yeah. So the first thing you want to do when you take a tree home, you dig your hole, you plant your tree, you get it restaked and resituated, and you get it whitewashed. That's gonna protect against that physical stress damage from day one.
That's great.
Well, one of the most important concepts in the Southwest, or even in the nation, let's say, to being successful with fruit trees is to protect them against physical stress. You know, this is Irvine, California. It's in the heart of Orange County. It's not a really harsh climate. However, we had 117 degrees here last summer.
Correct.
Right after 4th of July. And it did some damage to some trees. But these trees came through it with flying colors. There was no structural damage, there was no wood damage, there was no sunburn damage, because we whitewashed these trees from the first time they went in the ground. We've used conventional whitewashes. We've used the IV Organics product over the last couple of years.
That's fantastic.
And the main reasons are to prevent against physical stress. That sun is going to promote a large amount of physical stress in a short period of time, especially when we get into temperature extremes. You know, 100 degrees down here is unusual. 117 was unprecedented.
Yeah.
So we had literally hundreds of thousands of trees in Southern California that were damaged by that heat spike. So you're taking the pressure off the tree. You're allowing the tree to maintain itself and not be affected by the effects of that hot afternoon sun.
Yeah.
And that's the most important part to protect from. On the east side of the tree, you're not going to get any sun damage. On the north side of the tree, virtually no sun damage.
Correct.
It's all this southwest face. That's where the hottest part of the afternoon sun is, and that's where the damage is going to come.
And that's the side that needs the most protection.
That's the side that needs the most protection. So from the direction we're facing, looking at these trees, you can see they're clearly whitewashed on that southwest face.
That's great. So whitewashing, predominantly the goal within this orchard is protection during the summer extremes.
Protection against the summer extremes. You know, also it's protection against some winter extremes too. Very cold, dry winds.
Yeah, I wanted you to say that. Do we have the issues here in Southern California, or are we just talking about just nationally across the country?
We don't have as bad an issue with winter stress in Southern California as other parts of the country do.
Yeah.
So I think it would be more important to protect in Salt Lake City, Utah, and Reno, Nevada, and you know, some of the areas in the Midwest and on the East Coast against wintertime extremes.
Okay.
But we certainly get the summertime extremes, and the same technique and the same products are going to prevent against damage from both.
That's fantastic. And that winter extreme is known as sun scald.
Sun scald.
So
yes.
that's that winter, nighttime low freezing, daytime warm temperatures, and just guarding and protecting the plant against those fluctuations in temperature during the winter months.
Yeah, and you know, the most important consideration here is most people don't realize how important whitewashing is until after the damage is done.
And these trees, take a look here. So we know that these trees are created by Floyd Zager of Zager's Orchard, but take a look at where these trees came from. The Dave Wilson Nursery. And the Dave Wilson Nursery is the #1 distributor of deciduous fruit trees and nut trees in the entire country. They, between this year and next year for 2020, they're expected to sell close to 14 million fruit trees. And these are trees that are not just providing the most delicious and nutritious foods to you and your family, but they're also trees that are cleaning our air and cooling our global temperatures and just and offering also life-giving oxygen. So imagine 14 million trees a year are going into orchards and backyard orchards such as our home garden. And this here came from the Dave Wilson Nursery. How cool is that?
Really cool.
Very cool. And so what we're gonna do next is whitewashing. And what we learned from Tom Spellman, who is the primary voice behind a lot of the education videos at the Dave Wilson Nursery, is when you plant a tree, that is when you whitewash a tree. And the benefits of whitewashing include, one, you're protecting the tree in the summer from the most hottest temperatures. So the benefits of whitewashing are huge. In the summer, it's protecting your trees from summer sunburn. So imagine your skin, summertime, 14 hours of light on your tree trunk, and this has a lot of tree trunk that's still exposed. The tree is very narrow in structure, so that tree trunk is gonna get a lot of sun onto the tree trunk and potentially burn it. In a matter of hours, or as Tom says, the same day, you should be protecting the tree trunk by whitewashing. By painting the tree trunk, what you're doing is preventing the sun from being in direct contact with the tree's skin. So by whitewashing the tree's skin, also known as what?
Bark. The
bark, by basically whitewashing it, you're protecting the tree from summer sunburn. In the winter, you're also offering insulation. Another phenomenon, hopefully you remember this from a few months ago when we discussed this. What is it called in the winter when you're painting and whitewashing the tree, preventing now winter what?
Sun scald?
Sun scald. So sun scald is where your daytime temperatures may be warm, being anything above freezing, but the nighttime low temperatures are still in the freezing temperatures, and the tree above ground will begin to dehydrate and dry out. So by whitewashing the tree in the winter, what you're preventing is the tree from dehydrating, especially when you get a warm 65, 75, sometimes even an 80-degree day on nights that are still in the freezing, you know, below 32-degree Fahrenheit nights. What ends up happening is the tree will begin to dry out. And even though it might flower, even though it might initially push some growth, it'll quickly dry out and sometimes die going into spring and summer. And that's another value of what whitewashing will offer the tree. In addition to, whitewashing will also help prevent beetles and termites and other disease from entering the plant, especially this product over here that you got to your right. So I'm gonna pick one up. This one here is the oil-free. Here it says Ivory Organics Whitewash, protection against damaging summer sunburn and winter sun scald, as we just discussed. But this product over here, being the yellow label, which is now also OMRI listed for organic use, offers the protection from damaging sunburn in addition to insects and rodents. And let's read, for use on your fruit, nut trees, ornamental trees, and shrubs. And this is for use in organic production and healthier than latex paint and tar-based products. And latex paint is designed to go on your home, and 100 years later there'll still be paint on your home, but your trees, about every 1 to 2 years you're gonna have to paint them because the trees are growing, and if you've got latex paint on your tree, you're gonna end up with latex soil for a very long time. And a lot of the organic orchards are now banned from even using latex paint on their orchard trees, as they're contaminating the soil for a long time using latex paint, and tar, similar to latex, is just gonna last a long time. The other thing too, being healthier, is that tar and latex paint trap moisture, and especially on a grafting wound, as we're going to be covering today, or any pruned branches. If you've got a tar product or latex paint on that pruned surface, then you're trapping moisture, and the tree is a living organism. Unlike your table that might be made out of wood, if you put tar or latex paint on it, no problem. But if you put on a tree, there's moisture behind there, and what will happen to the wood that you're now coating with tar and latex is you're going to end up with wood behind that surface that's going to begin to rot. And that's why there's a lot of research that says do not cover those pruned surfaces. But Ivory Organic products are porous. It allows moisture to pass through freely. And even as a foliar spray, if we can pull up the bottle here, we can take a look. This one here is the ready-to-use spray. You can also put it on the leaves, which we're going to do towards the end. And that was exactly like what we saw when we also visited the Dave Wilson orchard that was planted a few cities away on our way to San Francisco. We found an orchard covered with Dave Wilson Nursery sleeves, and the entire structure was sprayed. And that's something we're going to do before we conclude. But again, the product being porous, you can apply it to the plant, and you can still foliar feed and actually fertilize your plants through the leaves and all, because the product is porous. And again, it's a healthier application. So let's get to whitewashing. So let's get started. Here's your brush.
Thank you.
And we're going to start at the base and work our way up into the canopy of the tree. So we're going to start at the base of the tree and work our way up. But something I want to point out as well, and I'm hoping the camera can catch this, is you can see that this here is a part of the grafting wound. I can see that there's a little bit of paste or glue or something that was used in the grafting process. And when the ants were marching up and down the tree, I was thinking if there was any cavity in there, sometimes ants will colonize in there. If you've got an issue with beetles, like peach trees and peach tree borers, or termites or any exposed wood, as I've seen even on apple trees in the past, with beetles and termites that were, attacking exposed where there was no bark on the tree, it's important to protect it, and the goal is to increase the longevity and the health of the plant. The way that this yellow label helps protect, and again, what I'm going to do is get into this grafting wound over here, and the way that it's going to help keep pests from boring in and out of any of these coated surfaces are with these oils. If you can come in a little closer, you can see that it's got castor and cinnamon and clove, garlic, peppermint, rosemary, and spearmint oils, and those oils serve as repellents. But the goal with this product is to keep pests from boring into those surfaces, and at the same time, it's also, as we discussed earlier, protecting the plants from summer sunburn. In the winter, it's offering insulation, protecting the plant from winter sun scald. And our goal is just to get up as high as protecting the tree trunk and hopefully the lower branches. There's some leaves on these, which next year will be part of the primary structure, but the goal is to protect the tree trunk and the primary branches, and that I define as being the heart of the tree. And these are the branches that are going to ultimately support fruit for the many decades to come. So Isabelle was just asking, should I paint this? It's like we're getting out of the canopy of the tree, and the answer is yes. When we're way up in this area, the sun is going to be beaming through into this, again, very narrow beam. This is a tree trunk I'm going to want to preserve for, again, many decades. This is still low, and the goal is to prune this tree to be all within reach at all times, and so we can always pick the fruit from ground level without having to get ladders and pick fruit that's way up and and beyond reach. And the goal is to protect all of the branches. This is a process that we're going to do on average once a year or once every 2 years, just to make sure that those tree trunks don't get exposed to too much sun, again, during the hottest summer days as well as the coldest winter nights. The application of the product, one last thing I want to say about whitewashing, as Isabelle and I continue to finish this, is that the product can be used as over here. It gives you the brush on direction simply by filling up the can with water. You can also use it as a tree paste. And I just want you to know the consistency I've used right now. And with a tree paste, it says add a 1/4 cup of water or 2 ounces of water. The consistency we've got right now is something between the brush on and the tree paste. It's going on quite thick. It's supposed to, if we did it as a brush on, properly prepared product should have the consistency of a 50% diluted paint. And then we're also going to use it as a foliar spray. And this little pint-sized can makes 5 gallons of the ready-to-use spray bottles, which is about 22 to 25 spray bottles. And the goal is to make sure that you pass it through a strainer first to avoid the possibility of clogging. And when it comes to the powder that's within it, you're only going to take about 1/3 to 1/2 of a teaspoon of the powder with 5 to 10 drops of the oil. Make sure you take that solution, filter it before you put it into your spray mechanism to avoid the risk of clogging. And again, here's a little bit more of that tree trunk. We can get that protected. We're going to continue that all the way down like so. So Isabelle, remember again, when we visited Dave Wilson Nursery, we left on our way to San Francisco, we found an orchard planted with Dave Wilson Nursery fruit trees, and we noticed the entire structure was whitewashed. We're talking about there was a sleeve on the base of the tree trunk, and then the upper stems that were impossible, like very challenging to go and get brush onto the stems. What they did is whitewash the entire structure. And this is something we've been doing on Ivory Organics YouTube channel for many years. And what we're going to do now is we're simply going to take the solution, which again, you can use that pint-sized can to make about 20 to 25 of these spray bottles. And if you want to step aside, I'm going to begin spraying. And now we're protecting even the leaves and the stems. And this whitewashing spray can be used on your tomatoes, your peppers, your roses, obviously your fruit trees, your ornamentals. And take a look, if you can come in now, as the spray goes away, you can see we pretty much added a sunscreen to the leaves, which will then dry on and offer further protection when another 90+ degree day comes through our garden tomorrow afternoon. And so now by foliar spraying the entire plant, we've now protected the leaves, the stems, and then we've used the brush on to protect the primary tree trunk as well as primary branches to get this tree successfully thriving during the summer months and hopefully performing beautiful flowers and ultimately fruit come spring and summer. So the next lesson we're going to discuss is on training your tree. And the goal is to, while the tree is young, maneuver the branches to capitalize on sunlight and ultimately maximum fruit production. If we allow the tree to continue growing in this very upright structure, we're going to have a very skinny tree. Eventually it'll grow out, but it will never reach the maximum area. And the goal is to have a tree that's low growing with branches that are in that vase-shaped structure to capitalize on light and ultimately maximum fruit yields per year. You may have noticed behind me is this fig tree. This is the 10-in-1 fig tree that we've added 10 flavors of figs to it, and it's very low growing. On average, when I'm standing next to it, I can reach 98% of all of the fruit, all within reach. Like all the fruit are below wherever I can reach on this tree. And the way we accomplished it, if you take a look here, the very base of the tree is only about 2 to 3 inches off the ground, and we pruned it. And then it created these 2 branches. And then after it grew about another foot or 2, we pruned it again and created another 3 to 4 branches. But we didn't allow the tree by itself to basically take these 2 branches that eventually became the 5 primary branches to support the 10 flavors of figs that we've then grafted on it. It didn't happen by itself that it created that open vase structure. Naturally, the tree would push up all of this sucker growth in an upward fashion. Similarly, what we're going to do today is we're going to take these branches and we're going to pull them apart. Instead of them being tight and narrow as they are here, we're going to take these branches and pull them into the desired location that we want it, because this is a primary branch that's going to feed our family for decades. And so let us position the stake in place like so. And Isabelle, if you can get me a piece of twine. Okay, so now we're just taking the twine, we're tying the knot against the stake. You never want to tie the knot against the tree, as the tree is going to continue to grow. And we don't want to constrict that growth. I'm going to wrap that one more time, and we're going to put a couple more square knots on top of that. And then what we're going to do is we're basically finding a place that we can wrap this nylon string around it, and you can see we can now pull the branch into position that we're going to want it to basically grow and harden over the next, on average, 6 months. We're going to continue this with another branch on the other side. So Isabelle, if you can prepare another piece of string for me. And again, not goes against the stake, not against the tree. And now the branch I'm gonna wanna secure and pull away from, this is called a primary leader, being the primary tree trunk that's going all the way up. These are the lateral branches, and I'm gonna wanna pull this lateral branch down and start training it away from the primary. And this is the branch I'm going to wanna keep. And I'm steering it away again from the walkway. And now we can secure that in place like so. And that's it. So now we've just trained this branch. I might even get another stake in place and pull this branch back more towards the center. And this here is just a quick lesson on training your branches. And again, the structure here is gonna be more of like a freestanding espalier. Espalier is typically associated with training a tree against a fence or a wall. Here, the goal is to create a tree that fits our walkway, and still it can have some areas where it'll be allowed to grow over, but we're gonna keep this a nice tight tree. And then this tree will now be trained just as it was at the Dave Wilson Nursery experimental lot that we got to see just a few days ago. Just did stake number 1, stake number 2. This here is stake number 3 to help keep the central leader as straight as possible. That's gonna be important, as we just talked about the importance of preventing sunburn to the tree trunk. By keeping the branch centered is also an important principle towards helping protect the underlying tree trunk and branches. The goal is to create this umbrella structure, and if it's leaning to one side or the other, we're increasing the exposure of light entering the tree canopy and potentially leading to burn of that tree trunk. Again, whether it be first, second, or a third degree burn. So now what I've done, again, I've added the stake, I've tied a knot, and now I'm just gonna be securing the other side of the string, pulling the central leader, that primary tree trunk, into position, and now we're gonna secure it like so. And we're keeping, again, that central leader, that primary tree trunk, centered. And you can see that this branch came a little bit more off to the side, but I'm okay with that. The goal is I want to fill in this entire zone, and that's what's going to happen with this branch. And we're going to get to see that together over the years. If you remember to subscribe and join the Ivory Organics family of subscribers. So some of you maybe remember we did a little bit of root pruning. I'd say close to 5% or less. We did very minimal root pruning to the tree, but the whole process of planting a tree is a stress on the plant. And to help offset it, it's a good practice to also prune a little bit of the tree as well. Any root pruning we did should typically be offset by pruning some of the above ground structure as well. And so what we're gonna do, even though I really don't wanna prune it, and I really like the structure of the tree the way it is now, I'm gonna try to find something I can prune out of the tree. And I'm gonna start off with, and again, the more you prune, and again, the goal is another 5 to 10%, but by pruning, that is going to help the plant succeed and enter a state of hopefully vigor, where it's gonna continue pushing out some new growth before the end of the grow season, as this will go into dormancy. This is a deciduous fruit tree, meaning all of the leaves will fall off for the winter, and come spring, hopefully we're gonna see a ton of blooms, followed by a lot of new foliar growth as well. And the goal here is, by pruning, is we're going to help offset the shock so it enters a state of growth sooner than later. And so what I'm gonna do is simply prune right here. And you can see that's actually a significant amount of growth that we've taken off there. And we got that here as well. And I can even shorten this branch over here, this lateral growth. I can bring it on a little tighter like so. So the next goal I'm gonna do now is to take the Ivory Organics product, and the goal is to now protect all of those pruned surfaces. As you can see over here, this here is one of the pruned branches. We're simply gonna take the product and coat the surface like that. Again, I see some more exposed branches that I can also protect like so. And let's find the other pruned branch over here. And we can also coat that as well, like so. And again, this entire structure on the top is all going to be sun exposed, especially now that it's off to the side like this. And this is now going to protect all of those exposed surfaces. And notice I'm just staying on the very top of the plant. There's no reason to paint the underside of the tree as well. So we're just going to paint the upper surface, which is again the sun exposed surface. The benefits of actually painting the underside would be to prevent and protect the plant best in the wintertime from winter sun scald, as that's going to help the plant better retain the tree moisture within those branches, and it'll also help prevent the risk of premature bloom as well, as it's going to be insulating. Good job, Isabelle. If you've enjoyed this educational video brought to you by Ivory Organics, be sure to give us a thumbs up, and most importantly, don't forget to subscribe and hit that push bell notification to get these educational lessons as soon as they become made available. And don't forget to subscribe also for, what's the name of your channel?
Isabelle's YouTube Adventure.
Isabelle's YouTube Adventure. I'm going to put that link again down in the comments, as well as the end of the video. I'll put that little push bell subscribe button. Be sure to press it, and you're going to get to see a lot more fun activities that we do outside of the garden on her channel. Happy to share all of those experiences with you too. As always, keep growing with Ivory Organics, and wishing you all
happy gardening.
Happy gardening.